Okay, let's start. So, as Peter said, sound serious, clean architecture in Node.js. But anyone who expected to learn something about architecture right here, right now, can be a little bit disappointed because this talk is gonna be a little bit more inspiration to get into the subject than to get the practical knowledge right now. So I'm Piotr Błaszczak. I'm from Lublin, and for last 10 years I've been doing the full stack job development for professionally. I love TypeScript. I switched from JavaScript to TypeScript. I get TypeScript wherever I want. I believe it's in it strongly, and I think it's the best thing that happened to JavaScript since the beginning. I switched from PHP to Node.js 2 years ago, and this talk I'm gonna base on my experience from last year when I rewrite everything from JavaScript to TypeScript. And I'm right now using graph databases on my private project, and I did some SQL and NoSQL before. SlackMap is my right now open source project, side project, and I'm gonna talk a lot about it. And normally I work at Center of Information Technology in Warsaw, TSOA. So agenda is gonna be quite simple. So I'm gonna sell you some theory, what's the cleaner architecture, and then I'm gonna show you my tools and what I do in the server to achieve the best I can. So who knows the term, who knows what clean architecture is from this guy, Robert C. Martin, aka Uncle Bob, one person. So perfect. So you're perfect audience for this talk. So for me, Uncle Bob is really big inspiration. Like test-driven development, I learned from him. I'm really stoked about it. And last year I discovered this talk and I rewritten my backend totally to follow his advices. So clean architecture. So everything is based on the project I'm doing since 2011. So it's gonna be like 6 years, quite a lot. And I've did lots of frameworks. I started with XJS, Sencha later. Backend was in PHP, Zen Framework 1. Then I moved to to Symfony 2, then to Zen Framework 2, and then I switched to TypeScript with JavaScript, and lately JavaScript, Node.js with TypeScript. The front end was in XJS, later with Dojo Toolkit and jQuery UI. Recently, it's written in Angular 1, and right now I'm switching to Angular 2 with Ionic 3. So as you see, I'm more focused on my personal development with this project than to ship the product. And it was like my playground tool where I can learn new stuff because I love to take new frameworks and put them in practice in almost production state. And what Uncle Bob taught me, like I shouldn't rely my I shouldn't think about my architecture about framework. What do you use? What's your architecture of your Node.js API? Or I'm using Koa.js, I'm using Connect, I'm using Express. Actually, it's not architecture. It's just a tool. So Uncle Bob also try to defer the pickup of the tool, like to choose the right tool as long as you can, like defer this as long as you can. Because if you have to, for example, do your controller, do your service, and then you have to like import some kind of framework library and like extend your controller with this base class, you're gonna be enslaved with this framework for rest of your life, like the life of your application. Hopefully not your life. And most of the talk is about when you ask for what's the blueprint of this building, what's the architecture of this building, and if you see the blueprint, you don't see the tools, what concrete they used, what was the electricity made of, what kind of cables, what routers were put, what kind of floors are there, what technique you use to put the floors. Actually, you see the blueprint. So if you look at the blueprint of this building, you're gonna see that it's like a restaurant, right? Because you have kitchen, you have tables and all those stuffs. And the same should be with your application directory structure. If somebody gonna clone your repository of your project and see this, your files, your directory, he immediately should be able to say, okay, this is accounting application. This one is like some other business things you can say by the structure. So good architect, according to Uncle Bob, should maximize the amount of decisions, like defer most of the decisions as long as it's possible. Because how many of you have been working on a project for example, some time, and later you finished it and it's gonna die because doesn't like gonna work, like it's not valuable anymore. And sometimes we just choose technology because we think it's gonna be cool, and in the middle of the project it's like backing us, like it's holding us from moving forward, because like the application should be structured differently, should be use other database because it's faster, it's more agile. So if you defer the decision more, you're gonna be like free. So this is the clean architecture diagram. As you can see, something like database, UI, external interfaces, web interface, devices, everything is outside of the circle. And this is just communicating inwards to controllers, gateways, and other layer. This is all shaped in the onion layer style. This controller is just gonna use the classes of use cases, and inside is gonna be your domain model, business model entities. And you see these arrows are very important because they only points inwards. So your entities and use cases should not know where they are gonna be living. They can be shipped through the REST API, they can be shipped through the socket, or just by SOAP. So this is the basic idea. So it's shaped in the layers that just communicate with themselves. So how we can achieve something like this? So right now, it's good if you just go to the video of Uncle Bob and learn like deeply what he means by that. But maybe the tools I'm gonna show you gonna inspire you a little bit. So one decision you can take on the beginning of starting any project is what kind of language and technology you're gonna use. For me, web is the primary thing, so I'm gonna use a Node.js on the server because I do JavaScript in the browser, and I love TypeScript because of the static types and, for example, the flexibility of decorators. And I think it just works. Like static typing helps a lot with testing and stuff you're gonna see in a moment. So this is a controller, my controller from SlackMap. As you see, it's simple class, it's exported. It has like public getConfig method and postConfig. And you're gonna see very clearly, but we use TSOA. I don't know how to pronounce this library. It's very simple library, and we import our model. And look at this. This is just a simple TypeScript class. We don't know where it's gonna be served. We see some root, so it's probably gonna be /config or anything. It has some annotations, so this is probably gonna be get method to this routing. This is gonna be probably post method to this routing, and we inject some body from the post with this model, config model. So config model is gonna look like this. Again, it's simple interface, can be a class with all bit documentation. So it's a JS doc documentation, and it's pure TypeScript. So domain is gonna be string, Facebook app ID is gonna be number, and it's gonna be optional, and Facebook scope is gonna be array of strings, and it's gonna be also optional. And here in the documentation, we see that the max items is 5, and it should be unique items inside this library. So as you see, it's very basic JavaScript, TypeScript, something you're familiar with this. And for me, with only this, you should be able to go to your browser, just run the server and go to the URL and be able to see the response from the server on the right URL. Everything outside of this is made by this library. As I said, you shouldn't bind to a framework, but this is just set of TypeScript annotations, and it's gonna work with any framework you want outside. So it's just an abstraction layer. You can start with Express and then switch to Koa.js if you wish. And I've been using this project for 1 year, and my main goal was this thing. Who knows what's this one? It's Swagger. What's the Swagger? Okay, a few people. Swagger is a format of contracting your API. So with TSOA, you get Swagger documentation like this for free. What's the problem with this one? Swagger has its own syntax, own rules, and you have to learn it. In today, it's so many tools to learn. So if I have to learn another tool, not again. But with TSOA, I'm just gonna write my pure TypeScript class interface, do some JS doc documentation. I already know because I like documentation, and then I can generate my contract. And what I can get from the contract, I can get the documentation like this, generated for me right away. The documentation has this model example, how to do a request. I can put the request here, and I have this beautiful button, try it out, and I can test my API right away. So it's so cool that, but okay, next, what I need the contract with API. These are, this is a Swagger Code Again CLI. This is a tool where you can generate a API clients for all those languages. So just using TSOA, you can generate Swagger contract and then can generate all those languages for your API. So your API is open. So it's best if you can do great API, but if nobody is gonna use it, what's the point of existing? So with this Swagger, you can have documentation, and you can have like native all these languages API clients. What's great about clients? This is an example from Angular 2. and I'm just injecting the API. It's gonna be pet API. This class is automatically generated from my code, from my contract. I generated from my TypeScript interfaces, and you see I can get all the things I can do on the API. So just installing the client in PHP, Angular, or another language, and you can get free like documentation in your editor right away. And with Angular 2, you can even get the properties of the model inside the template. So as you see, it's just an HTML. So me as a author of the API, I can go right to your browser, to your HTML, and tell you that this property does not exist anymore, or something changed, or just give you documentation right in your HTML in your editor. So it's gonna be make your API very, very, very cool, and just for free, because you just generate some stuff and don't bother about learning even Swagger. You just do your job in TypeScript. Okay, going back to architecture. So you saw all those layers of your applications, and all those layers gonna be connected with the dependency injection. Anyone who's working with Angular 2 and Angular, it's built in. So here we're gonna see the user service, and it's gonna need the database connection to do the job, right? And you just import your model, your entity, you just import the DB, mark this as injectable. You have to do this in TypeScript. So the Inversify, because this is the library I use for injecting stuff, it's gonna just know what to put inside here. So still, it's simple TypeScript class with no other stuff. And here how you can configure the dependency injection. So you just do the instance of the container from Inversify. You just get your class DB and you just bind it. So whenever anybody asks for DB instance, return the DB instance. And here's the last line, shows how to use it. Just as the container to get the DB instance, and all instances inside are like composed by yourself. So you can ask here for the user service instance, and the container is gonna do the instance, but before that, he's gonna do the instance of DB, inject into the service, and return you back the full working object. But what's the advantage of it? It's for testing. So in test environment, as you see here in before, I can just switch. I have my FB service, it's Facebook authentication service, but on testing environment, I don't want to hit Facebook because it's sometimes gonna respond, sometimes not. I have to do a lot of, like, it's gonna be delayed, so your test should be fast. So in this place, I'm just removing the Facebook service, the original one, but I'm telling that if anybody in the application is gonna ask for the original Facebook service, just give them the mock version of it. So that's how I can really easily predict how the application, the login, the Facebook service is gonna work. And after the tests, I'm gonna just restore the container back to the original. And this is what you can put inside the server. So you have to just do the agent instance. It's gonna be also here, like next line. And inside, you're just gonna do the get method on the URL you are expecting, and you are just checking if the status is okay, if it has a property, and if it has the return has certain keys. So what was the beginning of writing API? It was probably you just open this URL in the browser and you just look at the response, and if it's okay, you go further. But what if you do the refactoring or anything changes in your application? So then you have to go to the browser and check all your endpoints, and you can see like writing a test for your API is so simple. and it's gonna stay, and you just run one command, npm test, and you have tests of all your endpoints. So it's really, really cool. Okay, so the idea with this, with my API is that I'm gonna have this one part like universal. I'm gonna keep the layer of REST or socket IO in the controllers. Then I'm gonna inject some interfaces. So this application by itself is not gonna work, but I'm gonna run this code in a different environments, and in development environments, I'm just gonna configure the dependency injection to inject the mock services and mocks use cases. So I can, when you develop the UI, you can get the API version which works in your browser very quickly with the database in memory. But in the production, I'm gonna inject the original production ready services which are using the file system and the DB and all those stuff. So with this approach, I can give you, like for UI development, I can give you a full working API, mock API, which is cool. In the company in TSOA, we just ship the demo server when everybody who's doing any front-end job can just with one command ship the version of current work to the demo server. It's gonna work on the demo mock API, and you can go to the client and ask if this UI is perfect without even touching the backend and touching Java in our case, or any backend language you use. So yeah, this is it. And time for the vacation, right? So who knows this place? Where is this? What's this country? It's Greece, true. And do you know what this guy is doing? This Samuel Vory, one of the best in the world. He's just finishing the walk of almost 600-meter highline in this beautiful place. It's funny, like this photo was uploaded to SlackMap, to my project, a few weeks ago, and I've been walking my company, and one guy had this shot of this beautiful on his desktop. So I just sent him email with the better version of the desktop. What I'm showing you this, it's because it's, as you see, this photo is from my application. This is the line. It's 576 meter long, so it's over half a kilometer. So quite cool to walk in nice environment. And this application is based on Node.js API on the architecture I just showed you. And what's cool about it, I've just started to open sourcing this project. So everything I showed you is gonna be on the GitHub in the SlackMap API repository. And you can just go there, clone the repository, and see how it's going, right? And also the SlackMap UI is gonna be Ionic free application for web and mobile applications, and it's gonna be using this SlackMap mock version of the API. And maybe you are disappointed that you didn't have the right recipe how to do this kind of good architecture. So that's why I just prepared for you the SlackMap NodeGen. For years, I've been doing generators, and right now, all of the major frameworks has their own CLI, right? Angular CLI, Vue CLI, React App Generator, or whatever. So I'm just doing the NodeGen generator for my API for SlackMap, and it's gonna be like you just NodeGen generate project, start new API project, generate some tests, generate some controllers, and start working without even knowing what's going on inside, as you do with the Angular. There's so much things to learn inside, so you can hide it in few commands, so you can start working on the architecture, not on the tools. Okay, thank you very much.
So are there any questions? Any questions to Piotr? Okay, so, oh, there's one. From Robert Kawecki, the master of Node.js. I'm very afraid.
No, quite to the contrary. This one's gonna be architecture focused only. And now you've shown us a very simple controller that, well, it basically had two methods to remind that was get, which simply obtained the current configuration, and some post handler that saved it. And seeing as it's quite a redundant thing to do in applications, is there perhaps a standard library that provides, that thins the abstraction even further, that you don't have to, repeat CRUD operations? Is there a library or a solution that you could recommend? Because it's nice that you have a generator for controllers which can drive models, but couldn't it be automated in the API layer? Because maybe you could just replace code generation of controllers with a controller-less architecture where you just write data to the model and that just drives itself.
I think it's a way to, like, this is the stuff we should put into the CLI. So to help you generate the way. I've tried to look for other projects, so before I start my own, so I just do the research, and I couldn't find anything interesting. And there was one, but it was like database-driven development. So you start with your database schema, you generate from the CRUD operations to that, and all those stuff. And Uncle Bob advised you to do the database as a plugin, so concentrate on your model. On your domain and on your pure, this case, TypeScript classes. But yeah, we should, if you need such a thing, we can do it in a CLI. You can do it by yourself, if that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks.
So, King of the Sky, Piotr Błaszczak.
Thank you.
Big applause.